Um, I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College. I'm here today with Luanne Lee. She's a college funding specialist from your college planning coach. And we did what we call an AMA ask, or an AMU ask us anything, whatever. I'm sorry. It's middle of the day. But we did a session a few weeks ago when the FAFSA opened up, just kind of obviously reviewing the changes. I know there's a lot of these sessions going on. I think it's great, if you can
Yeah.
session
What'd she say? Does she
and
know
answer
that, or she
questions.
just?
Oops, sorry. Can you mute yourself? And we realized that there were a lot of questions, understandably, from families with divorced parents. So we thought we would do this special session just for families that have questions related to divorce. And so that's what today is. We honestly just have 2 slides. We're just going to go through that summarizes, the changes that we see relative to divorced families, and then open it up for questions, and we'll just, answer questions as you guys have them. I'm curious of the people who are on here, if you want to share and chat. If you've done your FAFSA yet, how's it gone? If you haven't, when are you planning on doing it? So let me switch over and we will get started just on these 2 slides, and then we'll answer questions. Luanne, do you mind unmuting yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, let me switch over. Okay, can you see these slides?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, you want to just share, Luanne, about these slides, and then we'll answer questions.
So, I blame the Department of Education for everything, but it's been a challenging few years as they've been working on making these changes. The FAFSA Simplification Act. I don't, by reducing a lot of questions, it hasn't really made this very simple with all of these glitches, and because they just weren't ready. And so one of the biggest questions, or the most common question that we've heard, like for the last 2 years, once everybody was told, geez, it's going to change for divorced families. Well, what's the guidelines? What's the criteria and such? And I was really, just like you, expecting to have a list, and there just wasn't. They finally said, well, you as the parents will decide which parent is going to provide the most financial support. So in the past, it was the parent that the student lived with more than 50% of the year. That was the custodial parent for the FAFSA. And so that was pretty simple. And so sometimes one parent we knew that earned much less than the other, and as long as it wasn't detrimental to the child, then we would make sure that that child was living with that parent more than 50% of the year. So with this new FAFSA Simplification Act that came in and said, well, that's no longer going to be the case. It is going to be now the parent that provides the most financial support. And so then it set everybody off. Well, how are they going to know who provides the most support? And when are they going to make the decision? And how will we know? And are we going to get audited? And, all these kind of things. So the reality is that, you and your ex hopefully can cooperate together to figure out, well, which one of us is providing the most financial support. And a lot of people thought, well, that is the parent that provides the child support. Child support is not the complete financial support. In fact, I looked up what's the definition of child support, and it's just the sum that the non-custodial parent must pay to the custodian as a parental contribution for the child's basic living expenses, such as food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education. Now, we all know that sometimes that child support is very minimal, and you're thinking to yourself, well, just because they provide child support, I still provide the most financial support. And that's fine. Even if that other person that's providing the child support earns more, you still have to decide which one of you provides the most financial support, which one provides more in as far as the roof over their heads, their food, their clothing, education, what have you. So it's not going to be so much that FAFSA or not FAFSA, because FAFSA is just the form, but it's the schools that are going to determine, well, will they ask for verification? So, those of you that are divorced and or separated, and they may come back and ask for verification. We just don't know the full details yet because everything is in such a flux. And in the past, it also didn't make any difference which parent declared the student on their tax return. And so they still haven't come out and said, if your student is not dependent on your tax return, you can't possibly be the custodial parent. But I just want you to think about and a little bit of common sense. So right now, with this new change, and I see so many people saying, they never asked me for my income. Why didn't I have to put my earnings and such? You're automatically, if you're not reading the slide on the page when you log in, you're authorizing the IRS to transfer your tax return to the FAFSA. You're not going to see any of that information. It's just not going to show up. That's the reduction of the questions that everybody was so happy to not have anymore. Personally, I'd like to see what's being transferred. But anyway, so you're transferring your federal 1040 from the IRS to FAFSA. Now, if you are the custodial parent filing the FAFSA and your student is not a dependent on your tax return, and if that school is going to be providing a great amount of institutional aid, I would dare say that that could be a trigger for verification forms. So, and I'm not saying that you can't be the custodial parent in that case, but some people are trying to fudge all of this. So don't do any fudging because this is a federal form. It is, you can be have quite a hefty fine if you're caught providing fraudulent information. So I believe, and so do many of my peers that are in the college financial planning world, that after this year, with all of its glitches and trying to segue into a more seamless, that it's going to play a major role in whether the custodial parent is going to have that student as a dependent on their tax return. All you can do, and what I've been suggesting for my private clients, is have a talk with your CPA, your accountant, and see what's the financial impact to us if, yes, we decided that we were going to, per our divorce decree, that we're going to be transferring back and forth with the kids on tax returns. But if there's going to be a point where geez, my kids can qualify for more federal or institutional aid if I give up that tax deduction, and maybe I don't have to pay out of pocket as much. Maybe that would make sense. I'm not trying to give you tax advice. You do have to discuss with your accountant or your CPA and see, would it make sense to bypass whatever that decree was, to be able to manage during the college years. So again, you as parents have to decide which one of you are going to be the custodial parent. And so the old rules, for separation, it was, a legal or informal separation. Now the new rules state only a legal separation. So for some states, they're going to want to see a legal separation document. And in other states, there isn't any. So be aware of these if you are separated and haven't gone through the formal process yet. What does your state require? Now, if you are parents that are living together and you're divorced or separated, you can't afford to live at in a separate household, you're still going to be treated as married as far as FAFSA is concerned. So just, I've run into a number of families over the years that they're living in the same house. They're not speaking to each other. They're separated and or divorced. And that's fine for tax purposes, but for FAFSA, you are still considered, married, and you both will be on the FAFSA. Now, the custodial parent, that's the big change. It used to be where the student resided more than 50% of the year. Now it's the parent providing the most financial support. For those of you that are absolutely 50-50, and there's no budging, then the parent's household, so if the parent has remarried, and let's say both households, both parents have remarried, it's that parent's household, whichever household has the most earning power, is going to be the household that will be on the FAFSA. So it's the biological parent and the step parent. So just, if there is that exact 50-50, nobody pays child support, we split everything to the penny, then it's going to be the household that has the most earnings, the most income. So the reference year, 12 months ending on date the FAFSA was filed, and now they're saying prior tax year, just like this year we're filing the 2024-25 tax year or school year, and we're using 2022 tax returns. A big thing is the family size changed. So it used to be, student, parent, other children, maybe, a grandparent or such, other family members that are living in your household, you could add them as part of the household. Now, again, we're going back to the tax return. It's the student, the parent, the dependents from the tax return, and any qualifying child or qualifying relative. So again, there could be a opportunity for the schools to then ask for verification. So, and student self-support, financial aid counting as the student's self-support, used to be yes, and now it's no. So, but the biggest thing that most have been concerned about is how do we show which one is going to be the custodial parent. So Debbie, I don't think we have another slide per se, but
no.
and just get into, because I've been seeing a lot of questions coming in. I try not to look at the questions because I can't look and talk at the same time.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start with, this is just a general question. It's not even necessarily related to divorce, but somebody's basically asking, they got back their SAI number and they're saying, they're trying to understand what that really means. So the question was, is this what I'm going to have to contribute? So it might be good to just explain what the SAI is and how the colleges are using it and how that really relates to how much you're going to have to end up paying.
Sure. So, I've seen so many people say, oh, SAI is just an index. It doesn't have anything to do with how much you're going to pay and or not pay and such. And the reality is, yes, the SAI, Student Aid Index, is going to indicate if you have a low-income family and your SAI is negative 1,500 up to a 0. So we're going from negative to 0. Then that family can qualify for the federal Pell Grant. But as your SAI number is going above 0, so the Pell Grant is $7,395 for this year. So let's just say your SAI number is 4,000. So that means that you should be eligible for a Pell Grant of $34.95. If your SAI number is so 73.95, so 74.05, you're not going to qualify for a Pell Grant or any portion of. Just like in the old days, the EFC, expected family contribution, okay, nobody loved that number. Everybody hated it. They thought it was so confusing. I'm sorry, I think the SAI is even more confusing, because they've made it to say, oh, well, it's not going to be the amount that you're going to pay. It's the same formula. Cost of attendance minus the SAI equals the need. And so that need is what is left over. What's the gap? So if cost of attendance is 30,000 and your SAI is 10,000, there's a gap of 20,000. How is that school going to address that gap? Is it a 100% needs-based school? Well, then everybody looks for those. It's kind of like a unicorn sometimes.
We need one another.
Students can actually qualify for that. But the secret sauce of that formula is, okay, if they meet 100% of need, but how much of that percentage is going to be in grants and scholarships, and how much of that is going to be in self-help, which is loans, work study, or out of your own pocket. Because as much as we hate to admit it, financial aid also means loans. If you file the FAFSA, your student can qualify for the federal student direct loans. As a freshman, a total of $5,500. You as the parent can qualify to apply for the federal Parent Plus loans. And the maximum of that is the cost of attendance of attending that school minus any grants and or loans that your student would receive. So it's, it all boils down to, if your SAI was 24,000 something, then you're not going to qualify for federal Pell Grant. And depending on the cost of the school, their cost of attendance, it's going to be similar to what the EFC meant. You're going to spend at least that much out of pocket before receiving any institutional aid in most cases. So, again, it's not very transparent, but it still follows the same formula. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah. A few more questions. Some people have gotten in, they've filled it out, that's all good, they haven't had any glitches. A few people are saying that they went in as the parent, they started it, now their student can't get in. Why don't you talk about, I mean, and there is no like we don't know for sure what the best way is. It's just kind of what we're finding, you know? So why don't you share, Luanne, what you feel the best way is to start the FAFSA if somebody hasn't already?
Okay. So I am a blueprint type of a person. I follow directions. And so the directions from the Department of Ed, I saw so many of those videos ad nauseum over the last couple of years. They said log in as the student, complete the student, invite the parents, every contributor. They would initially say every contributor needs an FSA ID. Well, but then fast forward maybe 10 or 15 slides. But if you file your taxes married filing jointly, only one parent needs an FSA ID, but they both need to be invited if they're married filing jointly. The directions were as confusing as mud. So what I've been doing, and I've helped several dozens of people file FAFSAs, and knock on wood, haven't had one error. We file as the student, invite either one or both parents, depending on if they were a single parent or not, or whatever the case was, but completed the student's portion. The student checked, yes, I'm signing, and submitted. And then we log out of the student's FAFSA, which then opens the screen. You delete the student's FSA ID and input the parent that is going to be the signer, submitter, and they go in, complete. It will say, go to your activity section, and you click on there, and it says, oh, you've been invited by your student to help them with their FAFSA. So you complete your portion of it, sign it, submit, and everything has worked perfectly. Now, I would not do it in the evening, especially those the first 2 weeks. I would not do anyone's FAFSA at all. But even then, we would do it during the day, or maybe say like around 10, 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. We seem to not run into maintenance issues and that sort of thing. So that is what has worked well for me. And you also have to make sure that you both have your FSA ID before you start this process. So I've seen so many posts of people that are frustrated beyond belief because they can't get through or such, but it's just a matter of, you've just got to follow it step by step. And if you didn't have, somebody like me that was working with you, you needed to read and listen to those tutorials, and it would walk you through step by step. So if you've gotten errors, and because the system was overloaded or such, you could have done everything correctly, but you were maybe in the evening when so many people were trying to do it, and that triggered you the inability to be able to finish it. You could have done exactly what I was saying, but it was just at a time when the system was just overloaded and you weren't able to finish. You're going to have to wait until they've processed all of this before you can go in and make any of those corrections. It just is what it is.
So when there's a question specific to divorce about somebody who they've just signed off on their divorce as of now, but how does that relate to how they handle it? Because the tax year that FAFSA is based on, they were not divorced.
Okay. So when you go in to file, it asks you, are you married? Are you, separated, divorced, or such? And so you're going to check that you're separated or divorced. And then when you go to transfer the, it's also asking, how did you file your taxes, single, married, filing jointly or such. And so you filed, let's just say that you filed your 2022 tax return, married, filing jointly, but you've just disclosed that you're now separated or divorced. It's not going to, you're going to have to manually input your information. So it's not going to transfer your 1040. So then you'll go in and just input, if you're the custodial parent, you're going to input your information only from your 1040. Okay.
What about if the state, and you kind of mentioned this, so this person is separated in Texas, but it doesn't have a legal separation. So how do they handle that in terms of what you shared earlier about having to have a legal separation?
If they don't have a legal separation, then they just don't. So, just you file as separated. I honestly don't know how that's all going to, how that's all going to play out, because there's federal laws and state laws. So it's going to be kind of interesting.
A question about how long should it take for somebody to receive their SAI after they've filled it out?
So, that was interesting, because initially they said that we wouldn't receive the SAI until after the FAFSAs have been processed, after the end of January, about maybe, a couple of weeks after the schools have received and processed everything. Then as we're, doing the FAFSA, suddenly students were receiving emails, hey, here's congratulations, you're finished, and here's your SAI number. And then some people were not. So it turns out it was a glitch in the system. So, those, and then they said those that have received an SAI number, or it may be incorrect.
Oh, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of, you're just going to have to wait. Patience needs to be the word for 2024. If you're a parent with a kid in college, you're just going to have to wait until the colleges have submitted the information. Your student is going to get their summary. I can't remember what the new name of it is, but their student aid summary or student aid report. And they'll, typically after you file the FAFSA, the student would receive that like 3 to 5 days later. So now they're not going to receive that until after the colleges have.
And why don't you explain the delay that has been happening? I mean, which we were told that there was going to be a delay initially about when families enter their information in FAFSA and when colleges get it. And now that's going to be even a little longer.
Right. So for all of you that are frustrated, wondering, did I do this right? Because it's saying pending or still processing or whatever, everybody's is. Nobody's has processed.
And process means nobody's information has been sent to a college.
Correct. So it hasn't processed from FAFSA to the schools. Nobody's information has been sent. And, they're supposed to be at the end of January. Well, there was a big thing. I'm trying to use proper language and not nasty words that I talk to myself. So, there was a big calculation that they didn't have ready that was supposed to have been a better and improved income protection allowance to take because of the rampant inflation that we've had for the last several years. And that was never calculated. And so they came out and said, well, I guess it's going to be in the 25-26. FAFSA year. Well, of course, there was an uproar because that's a difference of maybe $4,000 to $10,000 higher SAI than what it should be. So a couple weeks ago, they said, well, yes, we're going to go ahead and now include that calculation, but it's going to delay things a little bit more. And so we're just waiting to see. They have two choices. They can either transfer, as they said they would by the end of January, so transfer your data to the colleges. The colleges are not going to have the correct data. Then, the federal aid is going to, Department of Ed is going to finish the calculations and then send that to the schools. So either the schools are going to now have to redo calculations, or everybody's just going to have to wait. And so we still don't know what the ultimate decision is going to be. I went to try to check just before we started, and I'm not seeing where there's any decision that's been made on that. So again, have some patience. It's not the school's fault. It's not, and schools know what's going on, and you can contact a school if they haven't changed their deadline dates for receiving financial aid forms and such on their websites. Well, shame on them for not doing that. Then call the financial aid office and ask them, have you changed your dates to make you feel better? But everybody's in the same situation, as are the scholarship organizations. They all know what's going on with the delays with the FAFSA.
But that being said, there are some schools who are asking families, and have you heard this, Luanne, to actually send them a copy of their, I guess, now that I'm kind of saying this, I wonder how they're dealing with it because the SAI might not be accurate. But I've heard that some schools have been asking families to send them a screenshot of what their final SAI is, or they've been asking them to fill out their own kind of quick version of the form so they can gather enough information and make estimates and still provide financial aid packages.
I've heard it. How legitimate that is hard to say. In the old days, prior to 2015, the starting date for FAFSA was January 1st. And we would, and it was not prior tax return, we would submit an estimated FAFSA to the schools and then get your taxes done as soon as possible to then upload the corrected information. So I honestly, so many people are not receiving an SAI email, their student. Right. They're not getting that, congratulations, you've completed. They're getting a, hey, there was an error and we're unable to calculate your SAI. I mean, if you want to take a screenshot of that and send it to whoever is saying this so that they know that you've attempted, I mean, I guess you could do that, but I dare say, I would question the legitimacy of those. Now, for families that have filed CSS profile for schools, well, that CSS profile is such a deeper dive into your financials. They pretty much know if you're going to qualify, what your SAI number or your EFC would be or such. So that's why a lot of families that you're hearing, oh yeah, well, we got an award letter from our school. I've seen several that got institutional aid because, they can do their own calculations. It's not showing anything to do with whether there's a subsidized or unsubsidized loan, because that is when as long as you file the FAFSA, your student can receive the federal direct loans and or the Pell Grant if they qualify. So that information is not on these on the the award letters that I've seen. And again, they're estimated. So, but it at least is giving those families a little bit of an idea of what to expect.
Okay, there's a question, maybe you could talk about step parents and how they factor into FAFSA.
They're going to be the second parent on the FAFSA. If you are you married filing jointly or married filing separately, you've remarried someone. So that step parent is going to be on the FAFSA. And it doesn't matter that they
So
don't.
this isn't a change. So just so people right, this is the way it actually worked before.
Always been. It doesn't matter that they don't have any financial responsibility for your child. It's just how the system has always worked.
Okay, I'm going to read a question directly. I'm married but separated for 3 years, and my daughter and I have FAFSA accounts and submitted it. We were notified that it was unable to calculate the SAI. Does her dad need to create the FAFSA, and when will we have the opportunity to fix it? So I'm reading this because I think it relates to what we were explaining earlier. The fact that this family was divorced and filled out the FAFSA and is getting this message that the FAFSA, that they can't calculate the SAI, it has nothing likely to do with the fact that they're divorced. It is just something to do with the system.
Correct.
So I would just stay with what you did. If what you did is correct in terms of, you filed it because you're the person who's providing the most financial support, then what you did was correct. It's just a system issue that we're all going to have to wait till they clear that up.
Correct.
Okay, here's another interesting one. My ex claims that since the children live with me, my time with them is equal to a monetary value, therefore making the mother the one who provides the more financial support. Is this correct?
Yes. Yes. So agree with your ex. But yeah, I mean, just because somebody pays child support does not mean that they are providing the most financial support. That's not a given. So if your kids are spending more time with you in your home, you're providing more sustenance to them, the two of you just have to work it out. And
this is a similar question. Another person is writing that the child lives with them 100% of the time. The parent actually doesn't even provide any sort of, has no custody, but that the ex is remarried and they make more money. It doesn't matter what they earn. It matters how much they provide in financial support.
Correct. So and that's where, everybody is confused. Just because somebody earns more, if they're not providing the most financial support for your child, then you are the custodial parent. But if they are providing more financial support, then they are the custodial parent on the FAFSA.
What about a situation, and I think that this would be okay, where the parent where the child is living, and maybe even the parent that provides the most financial support, is living with a partner, but they are not married?
So, and this is where people are going to say, well, this isn't fair. This is why so many people, parents, put off getting married or remarried until their kids get out of college. So if you are the biological parents and you never got married, but you live together, you're both parents on the FAFSA. If you are a boyfriend and girlfriend, and the boyfriend is the biological parent, the girlfriend does not show up on the FAFSA, and the child's biological mother does not show up on the FAFSA either if the dad is the custodial parent that provides the most financial support.
So just not sticky situations, but you just have to know where the lines get drawn.
Right, right.
Oh, and somebody is asking, what if a parent doesn't want to fill out the FAFSA?
Then that's fine. They allow you, they ask you that question. And if you don't file the FAFSA, the student will be able to receive the federal unsubsidized loan only, no Pell Grant, no other grant assistance or such.
So this question isn't necessarily related to, yeah.
And I would say that just because you filed the FAFSA, you are not financially responsible for anything in regards to paying for college. If you don't file the FAFSA, then you are solely responsible for your student not being able to receive the most financial aid that they could possibly receive. You are still, as long as you file the FAFSA, it's just benefiting the student. You are not financially responsible for anything.
This question isn't actually related to just divorce. This is a parent who's saying that they already have kids that are in college and they receive significant aid, but they're concerned that based on all of these changes that their aid is going to change. And is there anything that they can do about that?
Appeal. So that's a big issue that we try to fight so hard against, the multiple student discount going away. So they still are asking on the FAFSA form how many students will be in college. And you're this particular person that asked the question, you're going to see that all three of your kids are going to have the same SAI number, or EFC is what you've seen in the past. Your EFC was split between the three kids. Now it's not going to be split. If you hadn't contacted the schools that they're at already to ask them, how are you going to address this change, then I would suggest that you do contact the financial aid office and ask them. We've received grants in the past because of multiple students. Is that going to change this year? A lot of schools are going to and I hesitate to use the term grandfather it in, but they don't want your students to leave the schools en masse. So some of the schools, if they're able to, are going to continue to still take that multiple students into consideration. And then other schools are not. So you want to know so that you can start making some, you might have to adjust some things before. You don't want to wait until you get the financial aid awards, in April, to find out that now your cost of attendance has tripled.
Can you talk a little bit about what a parent should do if they do not have a Social Security number?
Personally, I've not ever had anyone that has that situation, but it depends. If you're still able to, like, if you don't have a social, the way that it's supposed to work and that you're able to use the federal system is you could put all zeros in where it had the Social Security number, but it's still going to trigger that you're probably not going to be able to complete the process until they've finished, transferring data to the schools. So you're still going to need some additional assistance from FAFSA that unfortunately they're not it's so difficult to try to get through to them, I don't know that you would be able to get that assistance until things have settled down some.
I know you touched on this, but maybe you could like describe a little bit more detail for families, whether divorced or not divorced, that have multiple students in college at the same time, what it used to do and what's happening today. Somebody was asking, and I think they're kind of going off of the previous methodology, and asking, will their SAI be divided among all their children that are in college?
I just answered that a moment ago. You know, it's going to depend on the school. No, your SAI number is not going to be divided amongst, you know, the 2 or 3 kids that you have in college. It's going to be, if your SAI for one student is 30, it's going to be 30,000 for each of those students. The only difference is going to be, you know, if each student has more or less monies in their own accounts. Now, that being said, I did one yesterday for one of my private clients, and although both kids had differences in their accounts, the SAI number came out the same. So that tells me it's not going to be a correct SAI number. So it was, because there was like a $5,000 difference between the savings accounts of both of those students, and they still came out with the same SAI number. But again, you'll have to contact the schools that your student are attending and ask them, are you going to expect a much different financial aid package than you've experienced in the past, so that you can prepare.
So I'm reading of people putting in kind of their stories about, and either they're not getting the invitation that their student is sending, or they're not able to sign the form. And I unfortunately, I don't think we have answers to these. These are all glitches of the system, and having to wait for the government to clean up what's happening. There aren't workarounds or anything. It's just this is, I guess, technically still their soft launch, but I
can tell you one of the things that, as far as the invitation, you don't have to go to your email and click on that invitation. As long as you have an FSA ID already, when you finish your student's account, their portion of it, and log them out, it's going to bring that FSA ID username and password screen to you erase the students, delete it, and put your information in there. And as long as you have an FSA ID, it's going to bring you up to a screen, and it's going to say, you know, my activity. Click on there, and it's going to say, you know, do you accept this invite? So don't wait until you receive an email, because sometimes they're going to show up in your spam folder or just not show up. And as far as the signature goes, everybody's making this mistake, and I made it myself the very first time I went. You get to that page and you've got all these green, you know, circles, and say, oh, everything looks good, but the signature is gray. So you're trying to click and nothing's opening. You just scroll down to the bottom, the very bottom of that page, and hit continue. And it will bring you to the signature page. You scroll down again to the bottom, check I, Luanne Lee, and then hit submit, and it's done. Worst screen ever on what they've done. So I'm positive at least 50% of the people that say it won't let me sign, it's that grade signature screen. Scroll all the way to the bottom.
Okay, I know you said this, but maybe let's just repeat it again, because there's more questions about the difference between a custodial parent and who's going to be financially responsible. So here's this person said, in our state, child support ends as soon as the child turns 18 and graduates high school. So the non-custodial parent pays nothing. So again, in determining who fills out FAFSA, like
Right.
custodial versus who financially supports the child more.
So you're confusing custody agreements and whatnot, child support and such. The bottom line for FAFSA is, doesn't matter if the parent finishes at age 18, is no longer providing child support, but maybe the student is still, you guys are still living 50-50 and they're providing financial support for them. It has nothing to do with child support. If that's the case, then whichever parent provides the most financial support. If, when they turn 18, the parent that's paying the child support says, I'm never going to see this kid again, then it's done. If they don't see them, they're not providing any financial support, which is, their loss, that parent. But you are naturally the custodial parent.
There's a question about corrected tax forms. If somebody had to go in or make an amend a 2022 tax return, how is that going to impact FAFSA?
So it depends on how late in the year that you did that amendment. So if it was later in the year, you're not going to be able to use the automatic transfer, and it'll come up and say that, and you'll just have to manually input your tax return. And that's how it's always been. And for people that maybe have had tax fraud and are unable to electronically file their tax return, it's going to be the same thing. You still have to give permission. So yes, I authorize the IRS to send any information on me, but some of you may have to manually input your information.
So here's a good question. It doesn't relate to divorce per se. It's just about the FAFSA. Is there a way to check which colleges that were selected on the FAFSA after we submit the FAFSA that the application was actually processed? And I assume this is if you want to go back in and make changes and add more colleges, even though they've expanded the number of colleges to 20 these days. But if a student wants to add more than, or maybe they submitted it with less than 20 and they want to add some more colleges to the FAFSA.
Okay. So that brought up a good point that I had almost forgotten about too. So there was a glitch this year with some of the code numbers in the FAFSA. So some of those code numbers to the school that you look up and say it's Penn State or University of Maryland, whatever. And you're assuming that that's the correct information. Once these FAFSAs get processed and your student receives their summary report, you want to make sure that there's the correct FAFSA code number to the school that you chose. Unfortunately, the only way to check, because we can't go in right now, nobody can see anything to make any changes. So you're just going to have to wait until it gets processed and just ensure that your FAFSA was sent to the school that it was intended. So hopefully that, there was another part to that question, Debbie, I can't remember.
Sorry, I can't either. I'm going on. I've been reading other questions.
The only way that you're going to double check, you can't make any corrections now. You have to wait until the Department of Ed has processed to the schools, and then you can go in. Just like in the old days, last year, if you say there was a rollover, and the only way that you could have that corrected and that rollover added to your AGI, and it wasn't supposed to, the only way to correct that was to contact the individual colleges that you sent the FAFSA to for their financial aid director to go in to make that correction. And it was painful. And it's going to be the same thing here. If you have made, there are certain corrections that only the financial aid department at the college is going to be able to make.
Another question. In the case that parents were recently separated and they need to input the tax information manually, do I just figure out my best? Do I do my best to figure out my portion of the 2022 return? It's easy to figure that out for the 1040 income, but what about the adjusted gross income? How do I report that?
So, you know, you can Google, I'm not giving tax advice, you know, I'll get hung, but speak to your accountant, your CPA. If you don't have one, you know, spend a couple of dollars and make an appointment with an enrolled agent or someone that can help you to figure out what tax bracket that you should have been in with just your income.
Okay. How do I report child support received from my daughter, who is in her second year of college, as I don't receive child support for her anymore, but I do receive child support for her two siblings, one whom is entering college in 2024?
So child support is now an asset. So it's no longer an income. So if you received child support in the last 12 months, it's going to, you know, you're going to report that as an asset.
So it's not specific to the child.
Not specific to the child, no, unfortunately. I wish that they had changed that like they did at the 529s.
We should talk about that in a second. Let me ask this one question, then we can talk about 529s. Can you give any more specifics about how somebody manually enters in their tax data on this new FAFSA?
I guess I'm not quite sure. The screens are going to come up and it's going to tell you the line items. So you're going to have your tax return. It's going to ask, you know, your earnings. So you go to your W-2, box 1, and get your, you know, whatever your W-2 earnings were, or your 1099 or such. It's going to tell you exactly where to look. So you have those line items.
Can the non-custodial parent still pay a chunk of tuition because they are making more money, but they don't fill out the FAFSA?
So you have to look to see, does that mean that they're providing more financial support? So if you're both paying the same amount of tuition, you know, whatever the bill is, you've split the bill, and you're, you know, again, it boils down to which one of you is providing the most financial support. Has nothing to do with child support.
So talk a little bit about 529s and how it might relate to divorced parents.
Sure. So you've divorced and one parent was the custodian for the 529, and you are the custodial parent for the FAFSA. That 529 is not assessed as one of your parent investments. A 529 is a parent investment. So if you, as the custodial FAFSA parent, are not the owner of that 529, it doesn't show up on the balance sheet. And now that they've changed where 529s from other than the custodial parents are no longer assessed negatively to the student as income to the student the following year, any gifts, financial gifts, whether it's a 529 or coming from an estate gift or such, is not going to show up anywhere against the student as income the following year. So that's a big plus.
Right. So that's something that divorced parents could plan properly, or, to take advantage of.
So for any of you that have younger children, take some of this and see, can you plan accordingly? I've had people say, well, I'm not going to trust my ex to, there's got to be a trust factor too.
Okay, this is a basic question, but let's just answer it just to make sure that people understand. Once a child turns 18, will the FAFSA still require the parent to fill out the FAFSA, or only the student fills it out?
So a student is not an independent student until they've graduated with a bachelor's, or they're at least 24 years or older, or let's say they're 18 and they got married and they have a child. If they're providing at least 50% of their own dependents support, then they wouldn't need the parent. They would be independent. But unless those things, if they were in the military, they would be independent. But a student, just because they turn 18, legal age of adult, doesn't mean that they are no longer a dependent on the FAFSA. You as the parent are their parent for the FAFSA until all of those other things.
What's your opinion to the people who have not filled out FAFSA yet? Should they wait a little bit longer if they don't have school deadlines that are pushing them?
So,
if hoping that some more of these glitches are really cleared up.
So if you feel that the only reason that you're filing the FAFSA is because Luanne and Debbie said everybody should file the FAFSA at least in their foundation year, that you're not going to qualify for grants, that your student would only qualify to receive federal loans, then you can wait. But if you feel that my income is low enough that I could qualify for institutional grants or federal grants or state grants, then you want to file your FAFSA. But if you follow what I said earlier, do the student section first, complete it, then do the parent section. Don't do it, after dinner in the evening when everybody else is trying to do the same thing and such. Try to get it done during the day. Make sure that you both have your FSA ID before you start any of this. You should be okay. But just make sure that you read the directions, listen to those tutorials, and at this point, you should be fine.
Okay, well, we're gonna cut it off right now, only because it's a little bit after 1 and it's the middle of the day. Thank you, everyone, for showing up during lunchtime. If you need more help, reach out to support@roadtocollege.com, and put that in the.
And I just saw this one question. So if your income has changed substantially since 2022, you still have to file with your 2022 taxes. Get your 2023 taxes done as soon as possible. and then be ready to submit either special circumstances, change in circumstances, whatever the college that your student is applying to, whatever the forms that they ask for, and it's essentially an appeal. So, but if you just lost your job, and that's not going to change things, because you had your job all for 23. But if you just lost your job and 6 months later you're still not working, then you would try to put in an appeal and see if the school would consider it. It's up to them.
We're with everybody. I mean, I wish we had the answers to all these questions. We're trying to, we've probably seen a little bit more, Luanne even the most, just because of all the different people she helps. We don't have all the answers. I think the government doesn't have all the answers right now either, because they're in a pickle trying to clean up their messes and trying to get it done as fast as possible. So the only other thing I'll say, and Luanne said it too, is be patient with the colleges themselves. They are really trying hard this year, and they're really the ones that are getting the brunt of all of these problems.
Yeah, and I can tell you probably 99% of the time, the questions that you have, the folks at FAFSA, I call the FAFSA hotline, they're not going to be able to answer any of your financial questions. Logistic questions, yes, but should I, my ex-husband, or my ex-wife or such, they can't give you any kind of financial help or questions, just like I can't give you any tax advice. So reach out to the appropriate people, and sometimes it's the questions that you are waiting on, on hold for 2.5, 3 hours. It's going to be the financial aid office at the college. You're still probably going to wait a while on hold, but don't start inundating them with questions right away, because they are really going to be challenged with all of this.
And one last thing, because I see somebody mentioned about extending the deadline. I'm not even quite sure what deadline you're referring to, but it is not out of the realm of possibility that the May 1st deadline of when students are going to have to decide may be extended. Again, we don't know for sure. It's just, a theory that just seeing the way this season is going, that colleges may be extending that deadline as well, because for everybody's good, because as a family, you may get your information back and not have as much time to make decisions as you would like, and as families in the past have had. So there's been no specific talk about it, but I would not be surprised if I start to see some conversation moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. But again, we're the 29th. So we stay tuned for a couple more days and see what's going to happen. I think it's going to end up getting delayed myself, but yeah.
Okay, hope this helped everybody. See you soon. Take care. Bye.